29th as a next step in their efforts to make U.S. markets friendlier to financial firms, including those involved in crypto. SEC Chair Paul Atkins and acting CFTC Chair Caroline Pham presented a united front when discussing future regulatory moves by the two agencies. And during a call this morning, Atkins reportedly said that it is time to leave turf aside and really collaborate.
So there were a lot of the topics in the meetings ranging from transfer agency, which is a requirement for how equities and assets can be moved from different individuals and firms, onto compliance. Compliance was discussed, interoperability across chains was discussed, and also what can be done and what are the factors for having firms in the US do tokenization more so inside the US rather than outside of it. So I think there's now a very serious effort underway by the SEC at multiple levels to solve many of these open questions on transfer agency, compliance, interoperability, and I think it's all seeking to culminate in more tokenization in the U.S. Economy rather than outside the U.S. economy, which I completely agree with as being the right goal. I generally want regulators to understand that they can enter a new world of automated and embedded regulation, because smart contracts, which are the mechanisms that actually manage the assets and hold the assets on blockchains, can be made conditional. So you can create all kinds of conditions around compliance, identity, transferability, and various other conditions that regulators want. So I wanted to make it very clear, and I think we succeeded in that in the meeting, that data going on chain, compliance working on chain, connectivity between chains, and basically the ability to set conditions for how transactions can happen is something that can happen publicly on chain, rather than having to have it be done privately within a bank's compliance department. And this is actually a really big shift, because from a regulatory point of view, instead of relying on a few select entities to run really big and costly compliance departments, what you can do is you can set conditions for how transactions have to work. And those conditions have to be met in order for the transaction to continue. And no person can decide to subvert them. So I think this was a really interesting topic that was also well received. I think private companies with tokenized shares is a more innovative approach that seeks to circumvent the current rules and just put stuff on chain and get them out there into the world using a transfer agent. So meeting the transfer agency rules, but maybe not necessarily meeting all the necessary requirements for everything else. I think there is definitely an interest from the SEC to update the transfer agency rules, and you can see as much from the speeches of Chairman Atkins and the different points that he and others have made from the SEC. I think once you update the rules of how you can essentially create a publicly movable and shareable equity, which is really what transfer agency is all about, then you'll see a lot more tokenization of private equity, public equity, funds, and other similar things. Until those rules get simplified, I think you'll have a few people on the cutting edge that are willing to do it and kind of hope for the best. But I don't think that the bigger institutions will take that risk. I think the smaller groups will take that risk. And so you'll have an inventory of, smaller groups or smaller companies kind of doing that. And that doesn't mean that they're bad companies. I think it'll still be really high quality assets, but it won't be the large institutions or their clients until those transfer agency rules are fully updated. Yeah, absolutely. We already work with many of the leading banks, institutions, asset managers, and institutional grade issuers. And I already have many personal conversations, and we have many engagements with them, planning and are already working to go into live production tokenization efforts in anticipation of these changes. And these changes are actually very technical and specific to something called transfer agency, and how tokens can be moved and how tokens can exist on a blockchain rather than having to exist in a very specific set of clearing and settlement rails and systems. And these changes are not that dramatic, frankly. I think they're pretty straightforward technical legal changes that through some amount of guidance and rulemaking can happen pretty quickly. I do think there is a kind of tsunami and growing group of really high quality issuers that are in the process of getting technology providers, getting a digital asset team being set up to do the tokenization. Because if you really look at Chairman Atkins' previous two speeches from May and July, you will see that the goal of the SEC now is really to enable tokenization. And the recent announcement you spoke about also restates that goal, is that tokenization in the US financial markets should be an easy, smooth, and riskless process. That is something that they've made extremely clear now. And I also felt it in my conversations with them, and our team is also meeting with them later today again. And we are working with them on a consistent basis to try and create clarity on what changes to transfer agency and other key rules would be the most useful for our industry. And we are receiving a lot of very real collaboration in that our goals in making the industry grow and tokenize in the US financial system are shared by them.